You're in an amusement park, laughing, screaming, stuffing your face with junk food. The air smells like cotton candy and fried dough. The energy is electric. Then you see it. A massive medieval-style castle sitting right in the middle of the park. It's got turrets, a creepy drawbridge, and even a moat. The sign above the entrance reads, "Haunted Castle." It promises the scariest walk-through experience of your life. For a group of 9 teenagers, that promise became something else entirely. Because when they walked through those doors on May 11th, 1984, 8 of them never walked back out. What happened inside would haunt investigators, spark one of the biggest amusement park scandals in history, and leave behind a mystery that still lingers in the ashes. And the most terrifying part, the bodies were so badly burned, firefighters thought they were mannequins. Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson Township, New Jersey was the place to be in the late 70s and early 80s. Roller coasters, carnival games, greasy food, classic summer fun. But if you were looking for something extra, something that got your heart racing in a different way, you lined up for the Haunted Castle. This wasn't just some dinky little funhouse with plastic skeletons and a spooky sound effects. The Haunted Castle was a full-on walk-through horror maze. Picture pitch-black corridors, twisted passageways, every red lighting, and live actors dressed as monsters jumping out when you least expected it. The structure itself, a patchwork nightmare. It wasn't a permanent building, but a collection of trailers slapped together with wooden partitions, designed to create a confusing, claustrophobic maze. The whole thing looked like a medieval fortress from the outside. Turrets, a creaky drawbridge, even a moat for extra effect. But inside, no windows, no clear exits, just darkness and disorientation. And despite all this, there were 0 fire alarms, no sprinklers, no emergency lighting, and on May 11th, 1984, that would become a fatal oversight. In that evening, 14-year-old Suzette Elliott and her best friend Tina Genovese arrived at the park with their school group. They spent the day riding roller coasters, playing games, and soaking up the last hours of daylight. Then sometime after 6:30 p.m., they decided to check out that haunted castle. They weren't alone. Along with Suzette and Tina, there were 7 other teenagers, 17-year-old Joseph, 18-year-old Nicola, and 5 boys they had just met that day. The 9 of them walked through the entrance together, pushing past the iron gates and onto the drawbridge, where accustomed gold welcomed them inside. It was supposed to be just another thrill ride. It wasn't, because somewhere deep inside the haunted castle, a fire had already started. The moment they stepped inside, the group linked arms. It was that dark. The passageways were narrow, twisting, and the air was thick with the scent of old wood and a stale fog machine mist. Every so often, an actor dressed as Dracula, the Phantom of the Opera, or the Hunchback of Notre Dame jumped out from the shadows, sending screams echoing through the maze. Now, Suzanne and her friends laughed, they shrieked, they stumbled forward, taking in the terrifying set pieces around them. They weren't the only ones inside. 29 people were wandering through the haunted castle at that moment, some ahead of them and some behind. 4 employees were stationed throughout, waiting for their cue to deliver the next scare. And then at some point, Suzette and her group hatched an idea. Why not turn the tables? They'd hide in the shadows and scare the next group that came together. It was the perfect prank. So they crouched near one of the displays waiting. Then somewhere in the distance, a voice cut through the darkness. "Fire!" The group froze. For a second, they thought it was part of the act. Some new horror effect to make the experience even scarier. But then, the air changed. The laughter from the other groups turned to confusion, then panic. And then, the smell hit them. Smoke. Real smoke. And suddenly, they weren't in a haunted house anymore. They were in a death trap. Because while they had been hiding, a fire was ripping through the haunted castle. And in that moment, they realized they had no idea how to get out. At first, the smoke was a thin haze, creeping through the dim corridors like another special effect. But within seconds, it thickened, turning the air hot and toxic. Then the flames came. Fire erupted from somewhere deep inside the haunted castle, moving fast. The walls, the props, the foam paddling. It all went up in seconds. The haunted castle wasn't built to withstand a disaster like this. There were no sprinklers, no emergency lights, no alarms to guide people out. Suzette and her group scrambled through the darkness. They were bumping into walls, coughing, eyes burning. The heat was unbearable. The smoke was so thick they couldn't even see past each other anymore, just shadows moving in blind panic. And somewhere ahead, another group had already realized what was happening. A girl screamed, "Run! Get out!" before vanishing into the smoke. Some managed to turn back the way they came, pushing past each other in a desperate sprint for the entrance. But Suzette's group, they're already too deep inside. Somewhere in the chaos, she heard Joseph's voice. "We have to hide." It made sense in the moment. There was no clear way out, no signs pointing to an exit. The haunted castle was built to trap people in a maze of fear, and now it was actually happening to them. The group stumbled toward one of the haunted displays, huddling together, hoping, praying that the fire wouldn't reach them. But the smoke was too much. Suzette gasped for breath, her head spinning, and then she collapsed. Outside, park guests had no idea what was happening. The haunted castle wasn't designed like a normal building. There were no windows, no open doors, no visible flames. To anyone watching, it was just another busy night at Six Flags. But then, thick black smoke started billowing from the walls. That's when a park employee, Gary Capello, made a split-second decision. He ran straight into the burning attraction, and inside, through the suffocating smoke, he found Suzette. She was barely conscious, gasping for air, seconds away from passing out, and without hesitation, he picked her up and carried her out. She was the only one who would make it out alive. For everyone else still inside, the flames were closing in fast, and time had run out. Outside, chaos erupted. Guests stood watching thick smoke pour from the haunted castle, still unsure if this was some elaborate horror stunt or something much, much worse. Firefighters from 11 different townships arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the night. But by the time they forced their way inside, it was too late. The fire had been burning for less than 10 minutes, but the damage was horrific. 7 of the teenagers, including Joseph, Nicola, and the 5 boys, never made it out. They were found huddled together near one of the displays, exactly where Suzette remembered them deciding to hide. But the most chilling detail? Firefighters didn't realize they were looking at bodies. At first, they thought the remains were charred mannequins, just part of the attraction's horror decor. It wasn't until someone took a closer look that the awful truth set in. These weren't props. They were people. All 8 victims had died from smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide poisoning before the fire even reached them. But their bodies were so badly burned that investigators had to use dental records to confirm their identities. The fire was out by 7:45 p.m. that night, but the damage was just beginning. At first, the question was simple: how could this have happened? Then an even bigger question surfaced: who was responsible? Six Flags Great Adventure and its parent company were immediately under fire, literally and legally. Investigators discovered that the haunted castle had no sprinklers, no fire alarms, and no proper building permits. The entire thing had been classified as a temporary structure to dodge safety regulations. And even worse, fire inspectors had warned Six Flags they have strongly recommended installing safety features. The park ignored them completely. Prosecutors wasted no time. They charged Six Flags and the 2 of its executives with manslaughter. The trial would determine whether the lack of the fire safety precautions directly led to 8 deaths. But in a shocking twist, Six Flags had a defense. They claimed the fire was arson. Just 8 days after the fire, a 13-year-old boy came forward with an unsettling claim. He said he had been inside the haunted castle with someone who might have started the fire. According to the boy, an older teenager had been leading his group through the attraction. At one point, the teen pulled out a cigarette lighter, flicking it on to light the way through a dark corridor. But then he tripped, his lighter hit a foam-padded wall, and within seconds, flames erupted. The fire spread too fast to control. The older boy was never identified or charged. In court, Six Flags attorneys leaned heavily on the arson theory. They argued that since the fire was intentionally set, the company wasn't responsible for the deaths, and the jury agreed. Six Flags was found not guilty of manslaughter. The executives walked free, but public outreach was massive. Families of the victims sued both the park and the state of New Jersey, settling for $2.5 million per victim. Still, for many, the case felt unresolved. Had the fire truly had been an accident caused by a reckless teenager, or had someone intentionally set the haunted castle on fire with people still inside? No one would ever know for sure. The haunted castle was completely destroyed, reduced to a charred, smoldering shell. Six Flags never rebuilt it. Instead, they quietly cleared the debris and moved on. But the memory of the night never faded. In the wake of this tragedy, new fire safety laws were introduced, forcing amusement parks across the country to upgrade sprinklers, fire alarms, and emergency exits in dark rides and fountain houses. It took 8 deaths to make that happen. But even today, some people still wonder, was this really an accident? In the mystery arsonist, who was never found, no one knows if that boy's story was true, or if that fire was intentional, or if Six Flags pinned the blame on a ghost to save themselves. All we don't know is this: on May 11th, 1984, 9 kids walked into the haunted castle and only 1 walked out. And the rest, they vanished into the flames. Thank you for today. I hope you enjoyed today's story, and please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.